Hi there. So now let's try to create some network visualizations using Tableau. So the way of doing this will be something very similar to what we did on Vega Lite, that is to try to use D3 for generating coordinates and positions for our visualization, and then using Vega Lite just for doing the actual drawing. So this is going to be a little bit challenging because Tableau is not designed at all for networks, but I think using that trick we might be able to do something. So for doing that, I just created a fort of the notebook that we use for D3. And if we come down here, we can see the tweets, and here are the networks. And that network contains the nodes and the links that we want to use. Now, one of the problems is that in the code that we generated in the previous video, what we use is to create a copy of the nodes, such that they will not get the X and Y modified. So in here we want the opposite. So let's come back in here, and then here is where we are creating the copy. And then what I'm going to do is comment this one out. And then what I'm going to do is just say that my nodes are going to be my network nodes, and my links are going to be my network links. So after doing that, I can run this thing, let it converge, and now if you go down here on the network, hopefully, and then of course it didn't work that way, there we go. So now when you span that, then you can see this. So again, one of the cool things about Navio, or not even Navio here, Observable, is that you can right click and then say download JSON. So we are going to download 3 files, and this is going to make sense in a while. So first, let's download a JSON with the nodes and links, as you see in here. And then we need to download 2 separate files, one for the nodes and the other one for the links. So I already downloaded the network, so I'm not going to do that in here. Now let's create the nodes and the links. So for the nodes, it's easy. You just create a file like a cell like this, and then you just say, I want to download this as CSV. It's actually more convenient. And for the links, you need to do a big hack. And the problem is this, like our links are actually a nested structure where you have source and target. And the way Tableau likes it for actually drawing paths that connect one thing with another is that it wants to have in a line, it wants to have all of the dots in each one on different rows. And then it wants to have an index, an identifier that will help it identify like each one of those. So what I'm going to do for doing that is that I'm going to do a map of the links, and then in here I'm going to generate 2 elements for each link. One is going to contain the target, and the other one is going to contain the link, the source. And then if I flat this, then basically I have twice as much elements, and I'm actually achieving what they want. Now, they want us to have the index of the elements, so I'm going to use just the index of the link, and then put this like an index. And then what I'm going to do is create a copy of this object, and then add another attribute called link that is going to be my I. Then I'm going to do the same with the target, and I'm going to create another link in here. So just by doing that, then I will create this, and then the next step will be downloading these things, download CSV, and download CSV for that. So I already did that. So let me open Tableau, and then create a new workbook, not this one that has an older version. And then in here, I'm going to go and open my files. So first, let's start with this one. Let's start with the node links representation. So for that, I'm going to drag the links. I'm going to show them. And then since I have X and Y, I can just say I want X and I want Y. For some reason, it puts them on the other way around. I'm going to tell it, do not use aggregate measures. So now it's looking good. It's looking close to what we want. And we are going to say that this should be a line. So when you do that, it's going to try to connect all of the dots like that. And then what we can do is that we are supposed to be able to use the link for separating the lines. And this should be able to show us like as we want it. But it is not working because it's taking a link as a measure. So actually you have to transform that into a dimension. You can imagine how long it took me to figure that out. And then just drag this here. And there you go. Now you have our links for our visualization. So you have some control about the things in here. Like for instance, we can say these links to be thinner, like how do you say that? I don't know. So then you expand this to use the whole screen. We can actually going to use a fixed axis in here. And this is going to make sense in a second. So let's go and say this goes from 0 to 400. And this other one, it's going to be going from, if I can right click in there, this is going to go from 0 to 900. So I actually want something to be, this to be like very precise. And finally, I am going to say, I don't want to see the header. I don't want to see the header, and I don't want to see the grid either. So I can format, come here to the grid, and say, I don't want to see the grid. Okay, so that's looking better now. Now let's add in more attributes. We do have the value of the path, and then we can put that like maybe as the color, and that looks more of what I want. And then maybe it reduces the opacity, so it fades away a little bit more, and it's not as noisy as it is now. Good, so now we have the links. Let's try to do now the nodes. So unfortunately, I cannot get them from this exact data set, although it might be possible with this other one. Let me actually try that. So let's say that I'm going to duplicate this just for testing, and then I'm going to put the text in here. So that seems close to it. I want to use a text tag. That's what I want. Oh, interesting. I didn't know I could do it from here. And then, oh, this is interesting because this value might be actually the value for the node and not the value for the link. So maybe you need to differentiate those in there. Let me get rid of this and make the size way bigger. So I actually want bigger fonts for the nodes that I use a lot. And then having done that, I don't think I need this link anymore, and it is in the text. Good. So the other thing I could do is that I could color code by cluster and tell it that it's a quantitative cluster, so a quantitative measure. So I'm going to drag that into dimensions and then put it in here. So that's looking closer. So I can say that these are my nodes, the other ones are the links, but actually later we're going to be removing that. So here is the trick. So you can right click in here and say to format and say that the background of this is going to be transparent. And maybe with that, you can guess what I'm going to do next. I'm going to create a dashboard. Let's make the dashboard automatic size, although I'm not sure if that's a good idea in here, but let's try. I can drag this in here, and then if I drag that, it's going to try to juxtapose. But I just figure out that if you hold Shift, it's going to let it float. I'm wondering if there is an easier way of doing this. But now what I did, the way I did it, is that very carefully, I tried to put this thing on top of the other one. So actually, one thing that could be very useful in here is being able to see where are the two of them, so you can make sure that they actually have exactly the same size. And also the label in there, like the title, helps me a little bit like figuring out like how high or low they should be. So that seems about right. Like actually now I'm curious if I should use the cluster for this. That looks actually better. And then the value for the size, that one doesn't work. So, but let's leave it like that. I think it will look better. So there we go. So now you have a network visualization created with Tableau. For the matrix representation, you actually will want to use the file that contain the other links and the other nodes, because and this is going to be a big hack. So let's see if I can pull that one up too. So I'm going to load the JSON, and basically I want, yes, because basically what you want in here is that you want the source and the target. So in this case, you want the things to be separated. And then I think that should be it. Once you do that, let's accept the data and then create a new sheet. And then in here, you want to use, is this one. So you want to use the ID of the source in here and the ID of the target, or the other way around, depending on how you like it. You want to say that this is going to be the entire view. When you do that, you cannot read anything, so get rid of the headers unless your network is really small. Then you want to say this is going to be squares, I guess. That's looking better. And I want to use, let's say, for instance, the cluster of the, maybe the target or the source, either way. So in this case, put that in here in the color. And finally, you want to do like some sort of sorting, and it actually looks better in here than in the other ones that I did. So I'm going to say descending on the cluster for like maybe the source or the target. Let's say cluster for the source, or maybe cluster for the target. Let's try this one. And then after doing that one, you can do the same one for this, and then say field, and it's descending, and it's going to be on the cluster of the target. And as you can start seeing in there, like it's putting like the things that are bigger on the left, like actually you have here database connections with everything else. And actually it will look better, and let's say this is a matrix presentation, and it will look better if you have like a smaller data set. So for instance, I can get an index of the link. So I'm going to put that into my dimensions, that I guess will be just here, like I guess here. And then I'm going to create a filter of that on the attribute. And let's say that I only want to see like first 200 measurements. When you do that, then you start seeing that it's a little bit better. You can make them a little bit bigger, and maybe there is like automatic will do that. Okay, so that's more of what I want. So as you can see in here, it's kind of closer. It's not extremely useful or helpful, but it's still giving you something. If you have less nodes, then probably it's going to be more doable. And that's how you can create network visualizations using Tableau.